Pues,
Excellent, thank you.
le queremos dar la cordial bienvenida al Rab Doron Pérez, quien es el rabino de la Organización Mundial Sionista Religiosa del Mizrahi. Se están llevando a cabo actualmente en México conferencias, el Congreso de los Rabanim de Latinoamérica. ¿Es de Latinoamérica o de
Latin America.
Latinoamérica? Es un honor para nosotros contar con el Rab en México. Después de un año de las tragedias, el dolor sigue ahí, la confusión sigue ahí, la frustración sigue ahí. No sabemos para cuándo, ya estamos hartos, estamos cansados, y eso que nosotros estamos bien aquí, relativamente. Pero yo creo que todos los que estamos aquí y los que no estamos aquí compartimos juntos nuestra frustración, nuestras ganas de querer hacer más, nuestro no entender de por qué y para qué y hacia dónde y qué tenemos que hacer y cómo lo tenemos que ver. El Rab hizo un libro que se llama El Estado Judío de la ¿qué? De la oposición a la oportunidad. El libro tiene como finalidad dar una perspectiva histórica basada en la filosofía judía, basada en la ideología judía, acerca de por qué llegamos hasta acá y cómo tenemos que ver las cosas para que se convierta este reto en una oportunidad para nosotros. El Rab es una voz de dirección, que es lo que necesitamos todos en este momento. Nadie sabe cómo lo vemos, qué tenemos que hacer, cómo lo tenemos que percibir y concebir todo lo que nos está pasando adentro de nuestra querida Medina y afuera de nuestra querida Medina, como Yehudim alrededor del mundo entero. Esta noche, en este lugar, tenemos el privilegio de escuchar una de las voces que tiene claridad dentro de la neblina. Es una de las voces que está tratando de hacer orden dentro de toda la confusión. Aprovechemos esta noche para que salgamos con esperanza, para que podamos convertir estos retos en oportunidades. Como todos ustedes saben y está anunciado, el Rab Doron perdió un hijo luchando por nuestros queridos hermanos. ¿Quién mejor que una persona como él para darnos dirección a todos nosotros? Sin más hablar, antes de comenzar, quisiera invitar al rabino principal de nuestra comunidad, Jajam Abraham Tobal, a darle la bienvenida al Rab. Beruchim habayim beshem Hashem, ze kavod gadol, besimcha gdola, beta'anug, שתהיו בקהילותינו, ברוכים הבאים למקסיקו, ברוכים הבאים לקהילת מונטה סיני, בשם עצמי ובשם כל קהילותינו. חכם.
Buenas noches, voy a ser muy breve y continuando con lo que acaba de comentar Jan Marcos, de verdad, sí es un honor, de Bemet Kavod Lanu, de tener al rabino Doron Pérez, porque considero que representa el judaísmo auténtico, los valores principales y reales de la Torá. Que esos valores es esa combinación de llevar las mitzvot de la Torá, el estudio de la Torá, pero con también entregarse con Mesirut Nefesh, arriesgando las vidas por defender a nuestro pueblo. Y lo que representa Rab Doron, tanto en lo personal, de su trayectoria en el ejército de muchos años, tiene...
What's that?
היית בצבא עכשיו במילואים.
לא אני. There's רב צבי, כן. כן.
Pero bueno, como ya oyeron, su hijo al frente representa este movimiento de Mizrahi, que son los jóvenes idealistas más en Israel que defienden a capa y espada, arriesgando sus vidas, lamentablemente muchas bajas, un porcentaje muy importante de los soldados jóvenes que murieron fue justamente de este grupo, porque son los valientes que van y defienden al pueblo de Israel. Y esa combinación de hacer por los demás, además del estudio de la Torá, estudian la Torá, siguen las mitzvot, es lo que es verdaderamente el judaísmo auténtico. Ese es el concepto, está representando ese movimiento de los valores verdaderos de la Torá. Por eso es un gusto y un honor que lo tengamos con nosotros esta noche en esta comunidad. Se viste de gala Montesinay recibiendo a Rab Doron Pérez, y sin más le doy la palabra.
כן, אני אגיד, כן. תודה רבה הרב, תודה. כן, תודה. I'm speaking in English, so I think if you don't understand English, I think there's, or if you prefer, I think there's simultaneous translation, so you can, נכון? זה אנגלית?
כן, אנגלית מאנגליה.
כן, מדרום אפריקה, כן. Yeah, כמעט אנגלית. So I can speak Hebrew, I can speak English, I can't yet speak Spanish unfortunately. Bezrat Hashem, hopefully I will soon. So Birshut HaRabbanim, it's a tremendous zechut for me to be in Mexico and to be in Monte Sinai. I've heard so much about the community and what a wonderful, incredible community. And I want to thank Chacham Tuval, Rav Tuval, thank you very much for hosting me. The Rav we're having a conference, as Rav Meta said, with many of our Mizrahi affiliated communities all the way down from Mexico to Chile. And Rav Tuval spoke at the opening of the conference and about Pidyon Shvuim, about redeeming captives and the difficult challenge of what to do, especially today in Israel, with what price to pay to bring back the hostages. It's a very difficult and complicated matter, and the Rav spoke about it so beautifully, so thank you for hosting me in Monte Sinai. Thank you to Rav Marcos Meta, thank you very much. We've had a number of conversations and now we've met in person. Thank you very much for organizing, for opening the community to us, and we appreciate it immensely. Thank you very much. Also to my friend, Fred Sada. You know Fred Sadia? You know Fred? Fred and Adina. So because of Fred, it might have been mentioned earlier in Spanish, but I didn't understand. I wrote this book that I'm going to speak about in a bit. This book was written in English about a year and a half ago. It came out in Yom HaAtzmaut for the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel. And in September, a publishing company, signed with me to print it, publish it in Hebrew, already before October 7th. And it came out last Yom HaAtzmaut in Hebrew, and then in Hebrew. And then I had the zchut, a man called Fred Saadia, who I didn't know, WhatsApping me, phones me, and eventually we managed to speak, and he says to me, Rabbi Perez, I was on one of the solidarity tours to Israel, and your book was given as a gift, and I think you said you read it on the plane, Fred, on the plane. It's a long plane ride. He read it on the plane back to Mexico, and he phoned me and he said he really enjoyed it, and he felt it should be translated into Spanish. So, Bishut Fred, thank you very much. He sponsored the translation and the publishing of the book, and I want to thank you very, very much. And a big round of applause for Fred. Thank you. In your zchut, it's now in Spanish, and thank you very, very much. And Fred and Adina and all of the wonderful children and son-in-law, David, it's really amazing to see everything that they're doing, and thank you. He was my driver. Not only does he publish books, he drove me around the whole day. He was excellent. He carried my bag, he carried the books. Fred, you've got the job. The job is yours. It was very special. So I'm going to speak a little bit about my son and my sons, because we had 2 sons, but Baruch Hashem we have 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. Our oldest 2 are boys. We made Aliyah from South Africa 10 years ago. Our boys were 13 and 15, and by the time Simchat Torah came, they were 24 and 22. They both finished high school. They both went to yeshiva, Daniel for 1 year, Yonatan for 2 years, to Hesder. They both went to the army. Daniel became, well, our older son Yonatan became an officer. He signed on in the army, an officer in the paratroopers in the Tzanchanim. And our son Daniel also went on. He was a tank commander. Maybe it's too close, like that maybe, yeah? That better, yeah. He's a tank commander and also an officer. He signed on in the army. So comes Simchat Torah, October 7th last year. Daniel is a tank commander positioned in Nachal Oz, a base next to Kibbutz Nachal Oz, very close to the border of northern Gaza. And Yonatan is a company commander, a mefaked pluga of 150 soldiers in the Tzanchanim, training them in basic training. They are all at home, and he's at home with his fiancée for Simchat Torah. Both of them ended up fighting. Daniel, we'll see what happened to Daniel in the video, in the movie now, in this little sirton, this little video we did. We put this together for October 7th, 1 year in the calendar, the non-Hebrew calendar, the Gregorian calendar. 1 year since he passed away, we put this video together, a little bit about him. And our oldest son Yonatan also fought and got, after 6 hours of fighting, he got shot in the leg and he was injured. So by the time we ended Simchat Torah, we had one son who was shot in the leg and he was in hospital, and the other son who was missing. But what happened to Daniel, we'll tell the story here. And then I want to speak a little bit about how we've managed this year, a little bit about the Gvura of the Jewish people, the state of Israel, and then a little bit about Mizrahi and the book, and then there'll be some time for questions. Okay, so I think what we'll do now, Rav Marcus, we'll show the video. It's about 8 minutes long. It's about Daniel and his life, and then I'll continue to tell the story about Daniel and Yonatan. Thank you.
צה"ל מתיר בשעה זו לפרסום על דבר מותו של חטוף נוסף, סרן דניאל פרץ, זכרו לברכה.
On October 7th, Captain Daniel Pérez was a 22-year-old commander of a tank unit stationed at Nachal Oz base on the Gaza border. Along with thousands of Israelis, Daniel was called upon to put his life on the line on perhaps the most fateful day in Israel's modern history. Taken hostage with 2 crew members, Daniel was declared dead 163 days later. His body has yet to be returned to Israel for burial. His father, Rab Doron Pérez, the executive chairman of World Mizrahi, takes us through Daniel's journey, from a self-focused teenager to a self-actualizing young man to a selfless hero.
Daniel was the most energetic, ADHD, fun-loving teenager you could ever imagine. I think he was the happiest when he was with his friends. He had so many friends from every stage of life, from South Africa, Israel, religious, secular backgrounds, all types. Daniel, I think, was the best friend you could have, so beloved and so invested. His older brother Yonatan and him were the best of friends, close since they were small, growing up together. They would play, have fun, and fight with each other. And indeed, when they grew older, they connected about challenges in the army, life, and leadership. Deep bonds of brotherly love. 1, 2, 3. Salute. Yes. You're not saying the Shema, man. Shas. Okay, guys, show us how you march. March around the room. Let's see the soldiers march. He absolutely loved sport, especially high-octane extreme sports, whether it was being a super-fast ice skater, wakeboarding, whether he was going full speed over a ramp, doing 360-degree flips in the air. No one loved high-octane energy more than Daniel. Eventually, during a wakeboarding accident, he fell, tearing some ligaments and cartilages in his knee. Despite operations and 9 months of physical therapy, Daniel was disqualified from combat. He would have to give up on his dream of being in the Sayeret Commando of Golani. Despite being clever and quick on the uptake, Daniel would not have been satisfied with a desk job. He felt he needed to direct his prodigious energies towards combat, so he actually fought with the army doctors for months on end until they raised his physical profile just high enough so he could enlist to the tank corps. Daniel absolutely loved the tank, both its complexity and its power. He became a disciplined, highly professional soldier, always striving for excellence. I saw him as a young man involved in self-actualization, wanting to be the best that he could be. Indeed, he was selected to be a commander and was chosen as the outstanding commander of the entire course. He continued thereafter to officers' course, where he excelled as well, and then received his own tank crew, known as Rab Pérez. He was then offered to participate in the next stage of development as an officer, to be a company commander. In fact, one of my last conversations with him was about his deliberations whether or not to continue further in the army. I felt that Daniel was at the best stage of his life that I'd ever seen him, and I was so impressed with his thought process and maturity. Then came October 7th. I have to admit that I thought Daniel's primary motivation was self-actualization and self-fulfillment, personal achievement, and not selflessness for a greater cause. How wrong I was. A great gift we received from Daniel was his diary that was returned from Nachal Oz base, a diary we knew nothing about. Now that he was an officer, commanding soldiers for the first time and making literally life and death decisions, he began to be deeply introspective. On the opening page, he wrote a heading, "The things I think about before going to sleep." Here he asked himself a question: why am I here? To this he answered that since he had gone to Poland in grade 11, he understood the price the Jewish people had paid when they did not have the ability to defend themselves. Now that he's a soldier and a commander, he felt he had this duty to defend his people. And then, on a separate line, he wrote a charge to himself: Im lo ani azmi. If not me, then who? It was this very sentiment of taking full responsibility for others that was exactly what drove Daniel on the most fateful day, not only in his life, but of the Jewish people in our generation. On that day, Daniel and his tank crew fought valiantly for 2¼ hours against the first wave of Nukhba terrorists. He then noticed tens of motorbikes crossing the border, the second wave, each armed with an RPG. He could have remained in the safety of his tank position and fired shells at them, killing some, but knowing all well that the majority would certainly get through. Fully aware that he was the last line of defense, Daniel did not hesitate for a moment. Without any concern for his safety, he left his position and charged straight at them. Shelling, shooting, zigzagging, trampling, Rab Pérez did all they could to stop every single terrorist until eventually his tank was overrun, where he was shot, killed, and taken hostage.
What's really, really special about this day and really inspires me personally is next to each grave of any halal, any person or soldier that has fallen for the state of Israel, there's an Israeli soldier that comes, speaks to the parents, supports them, really just gives them respect for what they have done for the country.
Daniel Ish Hamudot, Daniel the Beloved, that was what we wrote both on his bar mitzvah invitation and sadly on his grave. We also engraved 3 additional phrases that we believed encompassed who he was. He stuck to the mission at hand, fought with bravery, and saved many lives. You know, in looking back, I see how a young teenager, as teenagers are, focused on himself as the center of his life. How he grew into a self-actualizing 20-year-old focused on personal achievement, and then emerged as a courageous, selfless 22-year-old hero focused only on the well-being of others, genuine Mesirut Nefesh. You know, when speaking to Daniel's closest friends, and specifically when reading his diary, I'm reminded of the reflections of Otto Frank, the father of Anne Frank, when he read his daughter's diary. He said that only when reading the diary did he learn so much about his daughter that he didn't know, even though he spent years in such close proximity to her. So too do we feel that we learned parts about our son, significant parts that we never really knew. This fills us with both great pain and enormous pride at the very same time. On that day, when the Jewish people needed him most, Daniel was totally committed to what he had written to himself when he became an officer. If not me, then who?
An entire generation of young fighters, as exemplified by Daniel, Hashem Yikom Damo, together with his brother and best friend Jonathan, who also fought bravely and was injured, revealed to us who they really were. A selfless and heroic generation, willing to sacrifice their lives to protect our people, our land, and everything we stand for.
Daniel, as you heard in the video, was positioned at Nachal Oz. He had been there for a number of He had been there for a number of months with his tank crew. And the moment the missiles started coming over, he went into his tank and fought for 2 hours and 16 minutes. The reason we know this is because every tank has got like a black box which has got all the communications in. So even though he was missing for a long time and we didn't know much information about him, he was missing for 2 weeks, then presumed taken captive, then confirmed taken captive. Then the army found a uniform outside the tank on the second day, on October 8th. They did blood tests and DNA tests, and about 1 month later, they told us that the blood that they found on the uniform and in the tank was Daniel's blood. So we knew that he had been injured. That was very, very difficult. We didn't know how badly injured. We had hoped and prayed that he was alive. I always felt that if Daniel survived the first day, he would be okay. But once we heard he was injured, we didn't know how badly, and it was very difficult. I say thank God we had the, as hard as it was to have the uniform to know that he was injured, we were lucky that we had this, because of this we had something to bury. After 163 days, when we were told that he had died, the reason we know is because the army found, with certain terrorists that they interrogated, they found videos, and some of these videos showed Daniel being taken at 12 o'clock in the afternoon on Simchat Torah in the Arab Gazan town of Sajaya, not far from Nachal Oz, and he was seen on a motorbike between 2 terrorists. And the chief rabbi of the army told us that from all the investigations, from the Shabak, the Shin Bet, the Israeli intelligence, and the doctors of the army, they all reached the conclusion independently that Daniel, that the person in the video was Daniel, and that the person was dead. So based on that, the chief rabbi of the army and his Beit Din declared Daniel dead, and then they came to meet with us. So I say in inverted commas, we're lucky that we had the uniform, because we had something to bury. So on day 163, we had to decide what to do. Halachically, you don't have to do a funeral. You only have to do a funeral when you've got the body, or most of the body. Here we only had blood. So we didn't know what to do. I spoke to the chief, one of the rabbis in the army. He said, look, you have to bury the blood. We have to bury it. You don't have to do a funeral, but we have to bury the blood. So he said they would just bury it on the side somewhere, and if you want to wait until he comes back, then you can do the funeral, but we strongly suggest you don't do that. You never know if and when he's going to come back. You have something to bury. You know, I asked my Rabbanim Sheilot, and they all agreed that we should do a proper burial. Please God, when we're able to bring his body back, we'll have to sit Shiva again, or at least for part, and do another funeral, which we hope will be able to be soon, so that we can just close the sugya and only mourn, because, you know, for 163 days we had hope and prayer that he was alive, and then knowing that he was dead and buried, but still in Gaza. Once a month the army comes to give us an update, to tell us what they know. They think he's in northern Gaza, in Gaza City. They don't know if he's being held by Hamas or by Islamic Jihad, because in the last pictures they have of him, he's being held by two different terrorists. It might be Islamic Jihad, so they don't know exactly where he is. And as you know, he's one of 101 hostages which are still being held. I think 37 have been declared dead. 51 are hopefully alive, that we know from evidence, at least until recently, and another 14 are presumed dead, but we don't know. So we're lucky that we had a grave. We're lucky, and that's what's been the last year. So Daniel is in his tank. We know from the black box of the tank, he fought for 2 hours and 16 minutes, and as I said in the video, they killed many, many terrorists. At some point, the other tank that was with him got shot, and some of the people were killed. So, by the way, Nachal Oz base was the worst hit base on Simchat Torah. There were about 220 terrorists in the base during the course of the morning. 52 soldiers were killed on Nachal Oz, meaning 300 were killed on the day from all the fighting. 52 of them in Nachal Oz base, and 11 from the base were taken captive, including the 7 female Tatzpitena, the 7 female soldiers. So Daniel fought very bravely, and his team fought bravely until 8:45, and that was the critical moment, I said in the video, when he saw the second wave coming in, and each of them was on motorbikes, 50 or 60 with RPG missiles. Many soldiers, officers told us that Daniel could have stayed in his position. He was in a safe tank position outside Kibbutz Nachal Oz, facing the border. He could have stayed and just shot. But he understood from the battles on the day that if he did that, so he would kill 10 or 20, most of them would get in because they were spread out, and then each one is a killing machine. Each one could kill God knows how many people. So he intuitively knew that his responsibility was to defend the Jewish people. And you hear in his voice, you know, we were very lucky. The army let us listen to the last 2 hours and 16 minutes of the recording. So on the one hand, it's very hard to listen to the last 2 hours and 16 minutes of your son's life. You know how it's going to end. It's tragic. But on the other hand, it's very, very proud to listen to the last 2 hours and 16 minutes of his life, to listen to the decisions he made. He fought with kol ruach, with very centered, made amazing decisions. In fact, we had the Azkara for 1 year, and at the Azkara, the head of is a brigadier general. He's the head of the tank corps in Israel, Brigadier General Ohad Maor. He said, and I've heard this from him before, he said that what Daniel's tank did on that day will be studied for future generations about bravery, courage, and determination. He said he believes that what Daniel's tank did on that day changed the course of the war, of the battle in the Nachal Oz area. Had his tank not been there and not did what it did, things would have turned out very different for Kibbutz Nachal Oz. In fact, so he left his tank position. There were 50 or 60 terrorists. He knew he was the last line of defense. He went straight at them and shot and killed many of them. The army showed us, they took a drone picture of after the battle, where you see the tank, and you see on the sand outside the base what the tank did. You see the tracks of the tank, and you see it's all in zigzags, all like this, traveling around, knocking over, and you hear him on the kesher, on the walkie-talkie saying, turn now, change, shoot here, shoot there. Now he had to put his head outside the tank because he's the tank commander, and that way he has a machine gun to hold on to. So he had to do that. And they killed many, many terrorists. And towards the end of the battle, it seems like a terrorist got onto the back of the tank and shot him in the back of the head. The reason we know that is from the videos in Sajaiya. You see, I haven't seen them, but the chief rep of the army told me that it's a gunshot to the back of the head, and that's probably what we heard in the kesher. Thank you. So that was the 2 hours and 16 minutes of battle. During our Shiva, when we sat Shiva, some families from Nachal Oz, it's a secular kibbutz, they came to sit Shiva with us, and one of them thanked us. He said that he read about the story of the tank, and he said he feels that the tank saved the lives of kibbutz Nachal Oz. He said 133 children are on the kibbutz of 450, and all 133 are okay. A few of them were taken captive, but they've been returned. So there's very few hostages from Nachal Oz. And unfortunately, I think 14 people were killed from Nachal Oz, mainly in the front of but it could have been much worse. Up the road, Kfar Aza had 100 people killed, I think. Down the road, Re'im and Nir Oz, just terrible things. So that's a Daniel story. Jonathan, we're lucky. I think on another day, we could have lost 2 sons on that day. On our conference is a friend of mine, Rabbi Shmuel Slotki, who's come for the conference. 2 of his sons were killed on the first day. They're both married. They were both not in the army. When they heard what was going, they live in Beersheba, and they saw people from Sderot coming and screaming and saying what's going on in Sderot. They both got into their cars, put on their army uniform, took their handguns and went to fight. And they were fighting outside Kibbutz Alumim, and they both got killed. There's families which have been wiped out. There's siblings from the Nova. There's families from the Kibbutzim. It's just like a pogrom, like something which is just that, reminds us of the worst times of Jewish history. I think on another day, Rahman al-Itzlan, heaven forbid, we could have lost 2 sons. I think the thing which helped me start thinking positively about this terrible situation was after 48 hours when Daniel was missing and Jonathan was injured. By the way, Jonathan fought in 6 different places. He ended up, as Hashgacha, as Providence would have it, he ended up fighting in Nachal Oz. So the army sent him to Nachal Oz, not because Daniel was there, just because that's where they sent him. And he ended up commanding a group of officers at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which retook Nachal Oz base. Him and his soldiers managed to save 22 soldiers who were hiding in all different places. They killed lots of terrorists, and towards the end of the battle, he was shot in the leg. The soldier on his one side was shot in the back, on the other side in the stomach, and other soldiers along the way were killed along the way on their way down to Nachal Oz base. So I really feel that, and even though we ended the day with Jonathan in hospital and Daniel missing, and I couldn't think of anything else, like for 48 hours, it was like Vayidom Aaron, like Aaron was dumbfounded. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think, one son missing, another one injured. How was I supposed to lift up my head? And then all of a sudden I heard a video of a rabbi that I know, Rav Shlomo Weitzen. He's the Rav of a yeshuv in the Shomron called Psagot, and I know him. He taught me in yeshiva. His son was killed. His son lived in a kibbutz called Kerem Shalom. It's a kibbutz of Datim and Chilonim. And his son went there in a whole group of religious families, and they fought in... he was part of the civilian operation team. He fought for 6 hours until he ran out of bullets, and eventually he was overrun and he was killed. And his father comes on, this is on Tuesday, the 9th of October. His father sent a little video around, and it came to me saying that even though his son has been killed, he knows that his son went to live on this kibbutz out of Ahavat Israel, for Datim and Chilonim together. He knows that his son put his life on the line and did everything that he can and ended up saving the kibbutz. And by saving the kibbutz, he said he saved generations of people. And we know what the Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin says, that it says anyone who saves one life is saved an entire life, and here he has saved generations. And when I heard him say that, I couldn't believe that he could talk so positively. Wow. It helped me to feel, for the first time, it really gave me chizuk and some strength, and I felt, wow, maybe I can look at this differently. And that's when I realized for the first time I could say the word Baruch Hashem, thank God, that Hashem saved, that God saved Yonatan. If you would have told me, if you would have shared with me how they both fought on the day and told me that one of them would have been killed, I would have thought it would have been Yonatan. He fought in the beginning just with a handgun. He didn't even have his gun. His gun he left in the base for Simchat Torah. He ran to the front with a handgun. Somebody from Sayeret Matkal was shot, a top unit. He took his hat, his helmet. A friend of his was fighting. Thank you. A friend of his was fighting. I'm being looked after. I've got water. I've got tissues. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. A friend of his, a friend was shot in the stomach. And when they took him to hospital, Yonatan took his gun and his vest. And this is how it worked on the day, just people coming and fighting. So I just felt for the first time as pained as I am and was and still am for Daniel's hostage taking and death. I felt an enormous sense of gratitude to Hashem that Yonatan was not taken. As the pasuk, the verse says in Iyov, Hashem natan, Hashem lakach, Yehi Shem Hashem avorach. God gives and He takes. On that day, He took one of our sons, but He gave us one back. And Yonatan was supposed to be married 10 days later. He was engaged to be married, and we had a big decision to make. Should we go ahead with the wedding? We liaised with our rabbis. We thought about it. My wife felt very strongly they should get married. A religious couple, and how long we're going to wait. We knew it was going to be long. So we decided to go ahead with the wedding. I didn't know how we were going to do it, but somehow we did it. We got married. They got married on the 17th of October on Gimel Mar Cheshvan in a small wedding. We didn't do a big, we cancelled the wedding hall. We did a small wedding in our hometown of Yad Binyamin with live streaming for those who wanted to, because we had to uninvite most of the people. We did it very small. And I just want to share with you one amazing thing that happened. Just one amazing story that happened at the wedding. I didn't know how I was going to get through this wedding to be genuinely happy. I didn't want to be sad and crying at my son's wedding. So I didn't know how I was going to get through this. So what did I decide to do? I came up with a strategy. I said in my mind, I'm not going to think about Daniel. From 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I said to Hashem, I'm not thinking about Daniel. This is for Yonatan. From 4 o'clock to 11, I'm only going to think about Yonatan. So this is my plan. Then my wife comes to me and she says to me, Doron, I really want to go into Daniel's room to feel his suit. Daniel was the stylish one in our family. He knew how to dress, not like me. Daniel always used to say to me, he was stylish. We once went to buy glasses, these fancy glasses called Lindbergh glasses. He takes me to a shop in Jerusalem. He buys these fancy, I think cost thousands of shekels. And I said to him, Daniel, look, why are you spending so much on glasses? I said, these glasses cost 300 shekels. And then he says to me, Dad, that's why you look the way you do. He said, that's fine. It's fine. He said, I want to look smart. So he bought a beautiful suit, and my wife wanted to just feel the suit. And it was the last thing in the world I wanted to do. That's just the last thing in the world I wanted to do. But I went in with her. I didn't feel the suit, and we both cried a lot, and we came out, and I said to my wife, I said, let's focus on what we have. We've got Jonathan. Let's focus on Jonathan. And let's put Daniel out of our mind. So she said, fine, we'll do that. So here I'm coming to the chuppah. We've got the table of the chatan and the kala, and they come to the chuppah, and I'm standing thinking in my mind, Jonathan, Jonathan, Jonathan. Then the rabbi who's marrying them, who's a close friend of mine, the rabbi of our community, starts the chuppah, and he says like this: how can we start this wedding without acknowledging the person who's not here, Daniel? He started talking about Daniel. I'm looking at him and saying, in my mind, I can't believe he's doing this. He starts crying. We all start crying. He talks about Daniel. We do Tehillim for Daniel. And of course, he did the right thing. It wasn't mature of me to think that I could not bring Daniel to the wedding. It's just I didn't know how I was going to cope with it. But he did the right thing. We had to mention Daniel. How can you not mention, how can you ignore it? It's just I didn't know how else what else to do. And I learned an amazing thing there, that even though we cried bitterly, it was for 3 minutes. We wiped our faces, we continued with the wedding, and it was very happy. And one of our friends said, she said it was the holiest, saddest, happiest, most inspiring wedding she was ever at. When I look back at it, it was the happiest wedding, with a few minutes of the most painful minutes. Family pictures were very difficult. We did them very quickly. And then we went to the dancing. And the wedding for me was very happy. And I learned an unbelievable thing. I learned that it's possible to, the two words going through my mind at the wedding was charada and chedva. Worry and happiness. Happiness and appreciation for Jonathan, and worry and pain about Daniel. And I learned an unbelievable thing. I learned it's possible to carry both. And maybe the biggest thing I've learned this whole year is it's possible to carry both. I often find myself giving a talk like this. Sometimes I don't cry at all. Sometimes I cry, then I laugh, and I laugh, and I cry, and then I tell a joke, and it all seems to work. I don't know how. I think one can carry a lot of pain and a lot of darkness, but also carry a lot of light and a lot of happiness and appreciation at the same time. That's what I think resilience is. Resilience is the ability to acknowledge the pain, the difficulty, the loss. Give it space, but don't be defined by it. Don't lose yourself in it. There is darkness, but you don't have to live in the hole. You can live alongside it. A lady phoned me 3 weeks after the wedding, and she said to me, Rab Perez, how did you do this wedding? I have my son's wedding coming up. She's a religious woman living in America. She heard about the wedding. I don't know her. She said, my daughter committed suicide a while before. She said, there's no way I can go to my son's wedding without feeling so much pain. She said, I'm dreading the wedding. How did you do it? So I said to her, firstly, you don't dread a simcha. You look forward to a simcha. I said, I know why you're dreading the simcha, because I was also dreading it. And I thought that the way that I would handle it was by not thinking about my son. And I told her what happened at the wedding. I said, you know what I learned? That you have to think about your son. I said, what you need to do is bring your daughter with you to the chuppah, acknowledge her loss, show her how much you love her, by how much you miss her, and cry for her. And I promise you it'll pass. She said, how do I know? I said, I know, because my wife and I did it, and we're just regular people, and you can do it as well. I promise you. And I phoned her on the day of the wedding to give her a little bit of a chizuk talk, a pep talk. And that's exactly what happened. She phoned me the next day to say that's what happened. So I've learned in life that you can hold pain, acknowledge the loss, acknowledge what's missing, but at the same time hold so many other things. And I think that's what resilience is about. And I just want to say, I think that's why we're going to win this war, and that's why the Jewish people always manage to overcome. We are the most resilient people in the world. From Avraham Avinu, This week's parasha Lech Lecha, 3,500 years ago, almost 4,000 years ago, from the beginning of Jewish history are challenges. God says to him, Lech Lecha me'artzecha. Firstly, even that's a challenge. You know, does the spiritual journey have to begin by leaving your house and your father's house and your homeland? And we know that immigration is one of the hardest things in the world to do. And even when you don't know where you're going, just pick up and go, and I'll tell you when to stop. Well, what a nisayon. And our sages say that Abraham had 10 challenges, terrible challenges, but he overcame them, and he lived by them, and he lived through them. And the Jewish people have had many nisyonot, many challenges. You know, what do we tell our children on Pesach? On Pesach at Leila Seder, it's not so nice what we tell our children. We tell them, Shebechol dor vadorim dimaleinu l'chaluteinu. We tell our children, in every generation, people try to kill us. You know, we maybe forgot that Iran has been building a nuclear bomb. We had a very bad wake-up call on October 7th. That in every generation, omdim aleinu, there are those who are planning to destroy the Jewish people. It's unbelievable. That's not such an easy story to tell your child. And then we tell them to eat maror. Why must I eat maror? Well, bitterness is part of the Jewish experience. And then to spill blood, because blood is spilt. Doesn't sound very good, but it is very good, because then we tell them to eat matzah. And that matzah is also not, it's okay, you know. Matzah is a mixture. It's a mixture of lechem oni, this bread of affliction that our forefathers ate, which is not so nice, but also of the lechem of the geula, of the redemption. But then we have the korban pesach, beautiful meat, asado or not asado, lamb, whatever it is, excellent meat. We don't have today, but then we had it. And we tell our children, the halacha, ein maftirim achara pesach afikoman. The last thing you're supposed to eat at the Seder table is what? Today it's matzah, and in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, korban pesach. Why is the last thing we're supposed to eat the korban pesach, the paschal lamb? Because we want the taste of freedom to be in our mouth. The story of Judaism is a story of sweetness, a story of a tam tov, a story of godliness. But it doesn't mean there isn't maror along the way. And it doesn't mean that there aren't challenges along the way. And it doesn't mean that sometimes they come together. The matzah is the food of affliction and the food of redemption. If this was Pesach, I would speak more about that. But I think in life, we are a very resilient people. Somebody said to me, as a person who's dedicated their life to Klal Yisrael, do I have questions of faith? Do I feel it's unfair? And I said, I don't understand the question. Does God owe me something? Does God work for me? We say in Hebrew, Oved etzli. And I said, I think if I had questions because I'm feeling pain, I think that would be arrogant. For me, I'm sharing with you how I'm processing it. If anyone processes it differently, that's fine. I'm just saying how I'm processing it. I said, if I didn't have questions about how 1.5 million children were killed in the Shoah, all of a sudden, one of my children is taken, all of a sudden I've got questions. I said, I should only have questions if I have other questions. If I'm struggling to understand, you know, and then I can struggle. But if I'm okay and all of a sudden I've got questions, to me it feels a little bit arrogant. I'm grateful that the pain has not expressed itself in anger, not anger to the army, not anger to the government, not anger to Israeli society, and not anger to Hashem. And I think if one does have anger, that's fine. Part of dealing with mourning is anger, and it's acceptable. I feel grateful that I don't feel that, and I feel grateful that the pain hasn't turned into anger. And if people have questions, it's fine. It's fine. I just feel that I've, as a rabbi, accompanied so many people through pain and suffering and saw so many brave people. And I think being part of the Jewish people is being part of a people who've suffered so much but have never been defined by suffering. We've suffered, but we never play the victims. We always try and be the victor and try and find a way forward. And therefore, even though the Jewish people and the state of Israel is experiencing so much pain, and especially we were talking about at the conference that the religious Zionist community, almost 50% of the soldiers who have died are from the religious Zionist community, even though the religious Zionist community is only 12 to 15%, because so many are in the army and so many are on miluim, on reserve duty. You know, on reserve duty, the Rav was mentioning the head of World Bnei Akiva, Rav Tzvi Elon. He's been on miluim, reserve duty, for 300 days. He's 44 years old. He's a father. He's got almost a grandfather. And we're fighting for our lives. And I just want to say, to move to Mizrahi for a minute. The path of Mizrahi, the word Mizrahi, by the way, it means the east. It sometimes also means Sephardi Jews, Mizrahi, but that's not what it means here. When Herzl founded the World Zionist Organization, there were a group of rabbis who believed that even though it was a secular movement, one should still partner with it. One can bring authentic Torah values and partner with the movement, because it's going to hopefully bring Jews back to Israel. It's going to save Jews from pogroms. It's going to bring about kibbutz galuyot, the ingathering of the exiles. So these rabbis founded a movement called Mizrahi, which has been around for 125 years almost, which it stands for two Hebrew words, Merkaz, Ruchani. Miz, Merkaz, Ruchani, spiritual center. They believe that at the center of Zionism should be Torah values. And I've always identified with this because I come from a very strong Zionist family, but not religious, traditional Zionist, and then we became more religious when I was in high school. And then eventually, as I grew in my Yiddishkeit, in my Torah, I saw, especially through the writings of Rav Kook, what I've written a lot about in this book, just to tell you, the book's about two things. The book tries to give a Torah point of view on two things. Anti-Zionism. Why has anti-Semitism become anti-Zionism? Why? How did that happen? I found an unbelievable chidush, a novel idea of the Gaon of Vilna in his commentary to the Tanakh in Habakkuk. He says the most unbelievable thing, and that for me was a tremendous chidush. And therefore what I did was I developed this, comparing it to Jewish history today, to the Palestinian cause, and to see how anti-Semitism works, how it keeps changing its colors like a virus, and I try and explain that. The second part of the book is all about Rav Kook. Rav Kook was the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel. He founded the chief rabbinate, and he was able to integrate Jewish nationalism and Zionism into a Torah viewpoint. And for me, growing up in a Zionist, naturally having a love for Israel, but not always being able to give it spiritual and religious terminology, this really, really helped me and had a very big impact in my life. And I've tried to, in the second part of the book, say that the purpose of ultimately the result of anti-Semitism should be the unity of the Jewish people. And I've looked at Rav Kook's writings to say what he thinks the purpose of a Jewish state is and why unity of a Jewish state is the most important thing. And I try and write about how unity can be achieved in Israel based on the principles of Rav Kook's writings. So Mizrahi has always been this shiluv, this combination, as the Rabbi was saying earlier, between Zionism, Jewish nationalism, and Torah, between the modern world and the ancient values of the Torah, and today between the army and between Torah, between general studies and studying, and between Torah scholarship. And I've always been attracted to this Torah of integration. And so many people in the world, in Israel, especially in the religious Zionist world, are doing this integration. I can't tell you how many of the soldiers who've been killed and are fighting are Talmidei Chachamim, who've been in yeshiva for 10 years, who are both serious Torah scholars and serious in the army. And I really do believe that this is the path of Avraham Avinu. We're going to read in this week's parasha, Lech Lecha, that Avraham Avinu was not only a man of kindness and not only a man of incredible love for all people, he was also a man of war. And why did he go to war? the moment he hears that his nephew Lot has been taken captive, and Rav Tuval mentioned when you spoke earlier that the Torah says it doesn't call him his nephew, it calls him his brother. Even though it's his nephew, and it's his nephew who sinned, and his nephew went to live in Sodom, so distant from Hashem's values. It's his family. And he doesn't think for a minute. It's Ahavat Yisrael. And he goes out to, and what does he do? Vayarek et chanichav. He takes out his 318 chanichim, his apprentices. Rashi says, chincham lemitzvot, apprentices in following the commandments. But how's that connected to the war? And therefore the Ralbag says, one of the Rishonim, he says it's chincham lemilchama ulegvura. He not only taught them the values of Torah and mitzvot, he also taught them to defend themselves and to fight with bravery. And hence he goes on this unbelievable mission. And what does he do it for? To bring back one hostage. This war, Abraham is prepared to sacrifice his life and the life of all of his students for what? To bring back one Jewish captive. It also highlights how important Jewish captives are, but it also shows the war. And says Rabbi Cook writes in his book Orot HaMilchama, in chapter 2, he says, if you look at all the great saints of Tanakh, they all fought wars when they had to. Moshe Rabbeinu directed the war against Amalek, and Moshe Rabbeinu himself led the war against Og and Sichon. David HaMelech, Yoshua. And therefore there's no contradiction between Torah values and Torah scholarship and between serving in the army if we have to in order to defend ourselves. So I think the path of Mizrahi is a path of trying to integrate. That you can be in the modern world, but you can also be committed deeply to Torah values. You can serve in the army and be committed to Torah values. You can live a life of integration. It's not easy. It's sometimes easier to do this or to do that. But the way of the Torah, the way of Mizrahi is one of Torat Chaim, which is trying to do both. And I just want to end and say, I'm going to finish in a minute and give you some time for questions. So you can, if you want to, there's the book at the back. And again, thank you to Fred. And a lot of the ideas that I've spoken about here, some of them are here. I don't know if you saw in the video this sticker about my sons, Imlo Ani Azmi. So there's some stickers that's for free, you can take. There's some at the back you can get. And one last thing I want to tell you about, that I only have one, which I'm going to give to Rav Tuval, and I'll get another one to you, Rav Ameta. This is my wife's project, and I just want to end with this. It's a picture of the Beit HaMikdash. It's called Bayit B'chol Bayit, a picture of the Beit HaMikdash in every home, to put next to the candles before Hadlakat Nerot. What's this got to do with anything? So the answer is that something many of the soldiers have noticed in Gaza, is that in every single home in Gaza, in every single child's room, there's a picture of Al-Aqsa Mosque. They've even called the war Tufan Al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa flood. To flood, and on all of Hamas logos, it's always Al-Aqsa. And one of the soldiers came back and told his mother that the first thing he's going to do when he goes home, after 100 days in reserve duty, is buy a picture of the Beit HaMikdash. Why? Because he said, they know that what they're fighting about, we should know what we're fighting about. And then my wife said to me, she said, Doron, this is very impactful for me, because if they can have so much hatred, and that connects them to Yerushalayim, we should be able to connect through love and through yearning. And so we initiated this. We've actually sold about 11,000 around the world, mainly in Israel and America. We're just now bringing it to South America. I brought 120 with me. I got stopped at customs and had to pay custom tax. I said, but it's just to give out as a gift. No, not good enough, it's fine. So I supported the Mexican economy at the airport. But there are some here, we're giving them as a gift to the conference. I've only got one, I'm going to give one to Rav Meta as well. And I'll speak to Fred, maybe we'll get a few more, if you will find a way to purchase them online. We're just trying to work it out for South America. So this is Bayit B'chol Bayit, it's my wife's project. So I just want to open things up to questions, and just to say that with all the challenges in Israel, and there are many challenges, and with all the challenges that our family are going through, and it's very, very painful and very difficult, it's okay. It's going to be okay. I actually said, I'll end just with this. It was my father's 85th birthday recently, about 4 months ago. And it was the first time that our whole family had been together since the Shiva. And this was the first time that there was only one person missing, and that's Daniel. All of the grandchildren and grandsons were there. So my sister said, all the grandchildren come have a picture with Grandpa Gil. And as all the grandchildren came up, my wife looked and she just burst out crying. And I went with her to the side room and we cried. It was very difficult. My sister ran after me and said to me, Doron, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I asked for the picture and caused you pain. And I don't know where these words came out. I just said to her, I really have got nothing to be sorry about. Grandpa Gil deserves a picture with all of his grandchildren. But we deserve to go out and cry for Daniel. And I said to her, it's okay. It's so not okay, but it's okay. And that's what I think for me this period has been. I really feel I'm okay. I can't tell you how not okay I am. And anyone who's lost a child, especially in the first period, and we've lost a child, I'm still saying Kaddish for him because I started Kaddish saying, even though you only mourn for 1 month, and even though my parents are alive, my Rabbanim said I should still say Kaddish, but it's 11 months from the burial, so I'm still saying Kaddish. And I'm in pain every day, as anyone who's lost a child. And we're broken. But I can't explain it, but it's okay. It's so not okay, but it's okay. It's known that the Kotzker Rebbe said, Ein shalem yoter milev shavur, there's nothing more complete than a broken heart. I don't know. I mean, that's how he said it. I'm saying it differently. I'm saying that we're broken and it's so not okay, but it's okay. And I think it will, and it is okay, and it will be okay. And Baruch Hashem, Am Yisrael Chai. So, thank you. Let me open for some questions. We got time for questions? Yeah, thank you. Yes, got time?
Si tienen preguntas, por favor, vamos a dar unos minutos para preguntas. Lo que quiera. ¿No hay preguntas?
You can ask any. You can ask. Yeah, I'll just say this. Yeah. Well, just for a few minutes, you can ask any question you want. Any question is fine. I've been asked every type of question. Don't feel free to ask any question. Yeah. אפשר בעברית, כן.
אוקיי, השאלה שלי זה שהיית במצב של הבן שלך, איזה ישרות אתה מרגיש שהיית שם?
לא הבנתי. תגיד בספרדית והוא יתרגם. כן.
איך שאתה ידעת שהבן שלך נפטר, איך אתה ידעת איך אתה היית כאילו המצב הזה היה משהו
I think I understand the question.
¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta?
No, I think I understand. Yeah.
¿Entendió?
Yeah. No, I think I understand. I think what you were saying is when we found out that our son had passed away, how did we feel about that in light of the fact that he had been a hostage before? I'm not sure if that's the question, but I'll answer that question. My wife and I had a very, very different response. My wife struggled like anything during the first 163 days. It was so difficult for her. She could barely eat without thinking if Daniel's eating. Daniel has a very specific taste of eating. Daniel didn't like the cold. She could barely have a warm shower without worrying about whether he was cold. It was one long night for her. It was so difficult. Because she had always been in touch with Daniel. Every day in the army, she would ask Daniel what he's eating and if he's warm. I didn't feel that because I never used to ask Daniel if he's warm or what he's eating. I would ask Daniel how many of these he can do, how fast he's running, how the army's going, what his plans are. I would ask Daniel different questions. So I actually handled the 163 days much better than my wife. I was able to be active. Every time I was nervous and anxious, I directed it towards doing. In general, for me, it's easy to do. You know, you get some people in life where doing is their default position. I'm like that. If I can do, I'm comfortable. I always find it hard to be. My wife sometimes says I'm more of a human doing than a human being. I'm good at doing. Be, what does to be mean? Just to like be. It's hard just to be. I've had to learn how to be. But in the first 163 days, I was doing. I was running here, I was running there, I was running here. I went to all types of countries. I met with whoever I could to get Daniel out. And then an amazing thing happened. Once we heard that Daniel had died, we had different responses. For me, I was in such pain because there was no more hope. I couldn't do anything to bring him back. Yes, his body's still in Gaza, but he's not alive. When I asked my wife during the Shiva on Shabbat, I said to her, Shelley, Sharon's a Hebrew name, but in English, Shelley, I said, you know, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And she said something which I couldn't believe. She said to me, Doron, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel relief. I said, relief that our son is dead? She said, let me explain. She said, I couldn't handle 163 days of not knowing if he was being tortured and what was happening to him. Now that I know that he never suffered, he is not suffering and will never suffer, she said, for me as a mother, I feel that I can deal with my pain. Yes, I have the rest of my life to mourn, but it feels like I can handle it because it's my pain. I couldn't deal with his pain. That was too difficult for me. I didn't feel that. After 163 days, managed to somehow not think about Daniel as much. Every time I thought about him, I tried to direct it towards action, to do something for him. And then when I heard he had passed away, that was very, very difficult. That was real mourning, and it took me a long time to sort of emotionally, it really hit me very, very hard. So I think everybody handles things in different ways. We'll take one or two more questions. I don't know if that's what you asked, but that's what I answered. There was another question. There was one more question. Yeah, do you want to? Two more questions, and then we'll let you go. Yeah.
I think I heard the first time of you on a podcast of 1840.
Yeah.
It was like really telling the story, and I looked for it.
Thank you.
There was a second time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question for you is like it's not about your story in general, but like for us in our community abroad, Chutzlaretz, where we live kind of comfortable, we don't face a lot of anti-Semitism and stuff. I don't know what was the situation in South Africa, and I've read a lot about it. There's like the political Zionism and religious Zionism, and what was your like main motivation to do Aliyah? Like, I think it's effective, but not like the ideal to do Aliyah out of fear, out of they're killing us, so let's go. Mm-hmm. So that's one question, and the other question is, if you feel like in Eretz Israel you have been able to like fulfill yourself despite all the struggle that you face, knowing beforehand when you go to Eretz Israel, you know you're going to face terrorism and economic difficulties and stuff like that. Also, what you faced losing one of your sons. So how is like that able to? Can you tell us like more in detail? Like, how does that area of Eretz Israel is able to complete yourself, fulfill our aspirations as a Jewish people and as Jewish individuals?
Good question. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the questions. For me, living in Israel was always part of my identity and what I wanted to do. I come from my parents, especially on my mother's side. My grandfather was head of Maccabi in South Africa. He built all of Jewish sport in South Africa. We are all sportsmen. We play sport in our family, and we came from a very strong Zionistic family. And then when I became more religious, after my bar mitzvah, and went to yeshiva, so then I learned, religious Zionism. But I think for me, Israel and the centrality of Israel was always part of my identity. And therefore I felt like going to Israel was natural. I made Aliyah when I was 18. I studied in yeshiva in Israel for many years. I was in the army. I was 10 years in Israel. I married my wife. Our oldest son, Jonathan, was born, and then we went back to South Africa. What I thought would be 2 or 3 years, that it was 15 years, and that's when we came back 10 years earlier. And my parents and family live in Israel. For me, living in Israel was always what I was going to do, even when I was in South Africa and even when I went back to South Africa. So I feel, again, lucky that for me, Israel has always been part of my identity and where I want to be. I remember when we decided to make Aliyah and go back, I got the position at World Mizrahi. I remember somebody coming up to me in our community and saying, Rabbi Pérez, you're so lucky, you're doing the right thing for your children. And I remember thinking to myself, especially in South Africa where people are trying to leave, I said to myself in my mind, I said, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing for my children, because I don't know if any move, none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. I said it just in my mind, said to myself, I don't know if it's the right thing for my children. It just feels like it's the right thing for us as a family. What the future holds, the future holds. Sometimes people ask me, do we regret making Aliyah because of this? And the answer is absolutely not, because the decision to make Aliyah was made for the right reasons. I say in life, you can't control always the results. The results are up to Hashem. We don't live in the future. Only Hashem knows what's going to be in the future. All we have is to make decisions in the present that we think are the best for our future, based on what we know in the present. In the decision to go to Israel when I was offered the position at World Mizrahi, it felt like it was right for me, it was right for my wife, it was right for our family, and we made the decision for the right reason. I also don't know what would have happened had I stayed in South Africa. You never know. I just feel we made the right decision at the right time for the right reasons, and that's all we have. What happens afterwards is Hashem. It's not us. So I think that, and like even if I would think of leaving Israel, like where would I go? Maybe Mexico. Mexico seems very, very nice. But most communities in the world face anti-Semitism today. Most communities in the world are not sure exactly, their future. So I'm even not sure where I would go, and I'd have no desire to go because I feel that I'm in the place that I want to be. And yes, it comes with certain challenges. By the way, you mentioned economic hardships. A lot of people don't have economic hardships. Israel today is a first world country. Many people are doing very, very well in Israel. The standard of living is very high. So there can be economic challenges, but there can also not be. And there's a lot of blessing there as well. So I just think for me, because it's part of what I believe in, so like when you're doing what you believe in, it's like, I'll give another example. If a person's married and they love their spouse, does that mean you're not going to have problems? Of course. Show me one marriage that there aren't disagreements and sometimes fights and everything. But if you're committed, if you believe it's what you want and it's what you should, then it's part of the process. So it hasn't made me question anything. I think if I came to Israel for the wrong reasons, I think if my wife and I were not on the same page, we were exactly on the same page, that also would have caused machlokot between us, especially when you lose a son. So thank God we both love Israel. We both think we went there for the right reasons. It feels like we're living out Jewish history. And and I think it's wonderful in Israel, and I think it's wonderful in Mexico, and it's wonderful in a lot of Jewish communities around the world. And I really do believe I'll say one other thing. I think a person can't run away. I find if you run away from your problems, then your problems run after you. You have to I think if I was leaving South Africa, I don't advise any of you to leave Mexico. If you want to make aliyah and you decide for the right reasons that that's where you are going to, that's very good. But you shouldn't leave somewhere, because I find when you run away from one place, you just find other problems in the other place. You run away from your problems run after you. We see by Yaakov Avinu, says, Vayivrach Yaakov, his mother says to him, Tivrach, Padena, run out of here. But his problems ran after him. And Yaakov's problems only stopped when he stopped running away from Esav. Only when he confronted Esau and was prepared to confront the threat of Esau, then he was able to move on. But as long as he was running away, once you're running, you're always running. And so I believe you've got to, as long as, you've got to, if you're making decisions for the right reasons, you're going to the place you want to be, then I think, I think wherever you are, then that's the place you're supposed to be. Okay, one more. Says Rav Tuval, one more question. Harav Pasak. Okay.
Good night. Thank you. First, I'm sorry about your loss. I appreciate a lot that you put the face of your son, because this way we can see a person, not just a number. And for us, it's very important to know what is the reality of the people and the tzaddikim that they are fighting for us.
Thank you.
And my question is about how you feel about the country when we get attacked on 7th of October, because we were so having time to be fighting between us if we're Hilonid or no Hilonid.
Yeah.
And 1 year ago now, that this fight, we have time, the time have passed, and the country is still fighting about it. What you can tell us about this position from somebody that have the privilege that understand what is to fight for Israel, and to see his son doing a lot of mitzvah, just a seconds away to pass out, because that is very important. I think that the main point of the whole time that you see and watching the time have to be with defending the land that is the mitzvah from the Torah directly. No? So I want to know your position about that, if you can share with us. And thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I know it's late, so I'll just answer this question and then we'll end. So I think that it concerned me a lot before October 7th, the lack of unity in Israel. Part of the reason why I wrote the book is about that. The whole second part of the book deals with Jewish unity, Rav Kook's vision of how you have to be able to give place to the different parts of the nation. And I think we all know Sinat Chinam was the reason of the destruction of the Second Temple. Disunity and infighting has been a major challenge. I saw a midrash which says, when we received the Torah, it says that we received Vayichan Keneged Ahar. It says Ke'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. When we received the Torah, it was like one person with one heart. I saw two midrashim, rabbinic commentaries, which say that had we not stood together, Hashem wouldn't have given us the Torah. A precondition for receiving the Torah was standing together as a people. And I definitely believe, as Rav Kook explains, that Jewish unity is absolutely critical. That's our biggest challenge. It's not by chance that Sinat Chinam was the reason, and that is our biggest challenge. It was very bad before October 7th because of the judicial reform, which caused tremendous arguments, and it doesn't matter who's right or not. The arguments in Israel today are not nearly as bad as they were then. They're not nearly as bad. I think things have toned down. I do think now with Bibi firing Gallant, the foreign minister, it's going to cause a lot more. But it's nothing like it was then. It's nothing like it was then. I do believe, and it's what I've written about in the book, that the main aim, I believe, is we have to be committed to Jewish unity, because we are always weaker when we are internally divided. I heard from the head of the Shabak, the Israeli security, he said that from documents they found in Sinwar Yamach Shemo's home, he said the reason he chose to attack is because of the arguments in Israel. Soldiers, reserve soldiers saying that they wouldn't come for reserve duty, pilots saying that they wouldn't fly, and he thought that Israel is really at such a low point. But that is our challenge. I think where he underestimated us is that nothing brings the Jewish people together like people threatening us. Unfortunately, we're better at unity when we're being threatened than when we're not being threatened. Bezrat Hashem, we need to get better at unity when there's no threat. But I do believe that is the major issue facing the Jewish people, what Rabbi Soloveitchik calls a covenant of fate. We're in this together. And we have to be able to understand, I believe it doesn't really matter whose hands are on the wheel of running Israel if we're fighting over the steering wheel and the ship is sinking. It's more important right now to just make sure that the ship is, just put some safe hands on the steering wheel and make sure it's not going to hit an iceberg like the Titanic. And the rest of it is just to make sure that the ship is strong, that it can weather the storms. And I think it's really, really important now. Today, I believe, Jewish unity is the key. And I think we have to work towards it. Rav Kook taught that it doesn't help to complain. We can complain and, and there's not this, there's not that. Rav Kook says, it says 4 times in the Torah that we are an amk she'oraf, we're a stiff-necked people. Rav Kook says, what does stiff-neck mean? When do you get a stiff neck? Stiff neck means you can only see in one direction. I don't know if you've ever tried to drive a car when you've got a sore neck. All of a sudden you can't drive because you don't only need to look straight. Especially in Mexico, people drive here, wow. There's roundabouts everywhere and it's up and it's down and driving. And Fred's a good driver, you've got to push in everywhere. So what you have to do when you're driving is it's not enough to look forward. You have to look left, you have to look right, you have to look behind. So a stiff-necked person, says Rav Kook, is a person who only sees one direction. They've got their truth and that's their truth and they can't see anything else. And they're stiff-necked because they can only see in one way. And sometimes we get so convinced that our type of Judaism or our thing is that's the way and that's the only way. But Chazal have taught us, our sages, Shivim Panim la Torah, there's 70 faces to the Torah. There is only one Torah truth, but when it comes into the world, it's got different interpretations, and many of them can be true. And I think that that's what we really need, is to find the truth in every ideology, and find that doesn't mean everything is right, it doesn't mean everything goes. It's not woke post, where your truth is true. No, it has to be in line with Torah. It's asay l'charav. It has to be in line with Torah, but the Torah has room for different truths, and I think that's Shivim Panim la Torah, 70 faces of the Torah. And I think that's our biggest challenge today, is to be able to work towards understanding that we're in this together, and we have to understand there's enemies which don't care what type of Jew we are, and we have to be able to come together. And I think the more we're able to come together with a covenant of fate, togetherness, we'll be able to work it out. Thank you very much. Thank you.